Hey folks, welcome back. Hope you've been doing well out there. So in today's video, I wanted to share with you my thoughts on something that I think a lot of people don't understand about psychedelics, and that is the role of paradigm shift and the kind of requisite paradigm shift you're going to have to go through in order to get the most out of using psychedelics, whether that's really just for kind of personal development purposes, for like personal growth or spiritual growth, or whether that's for a therapeutic purpose like healing, trauma resolution, this kind of a thing. Either way you slice it, this is really important to understand. In order to get the most out of psychedelics, you're going to have to go through not one, but several paradigm shifts. Today, I'm going to explain to you a little bit about what a paradigm shift is, in case that's kind of a vague concept for you, and explain to you two of the major paradigm shifts that I see that people have to go through in order to really get the most out of using psychedelics for healing and growth. And the kind of spoiler alert here is that just to heal in general, just to really truly have a profound healing experience, psychedelics or not, you're going to need to go through these paradigm shifts anyways. So let's go over this and hopefully this will be helpful. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into it here. So like I just said in the intro, there are a couple paradigm shifts that you're going to need to go through in order to get the most out of your healing journey, your therapy journey, especially if you're involving psychedelics. These shifts kind of are a must, okay? So this is the thing I want you to really get here. So a paradigm shift is essentially anytime you are moving from one overall worldview or frame of reference or way of seeing or way of understanding something into an entirely new frame of reference, an entirely new worldview, an entirely new perspective that gives you a completely different set of understandings. Okay. So psychedelics, and psychedelic work inherently do this, but there's a way to do this constructively and consciously, and there's a way to do this kind of less constructively and kind of unconsciously. So I want to articulate to you the two major paradigm shifts that I see people go through before they're really capable of healing with psychedelics. Now, this is really important to understand because a lot of people are rushing into psychedelic therapy. They just look to the medicines for help. They're taking psychedelics at high doses at a rate, for a size of the population I've never ever seen in my life before, which on one hand is super cool and super heartening and beautiful and inspiring. Now, on another level, I see a lot of people failing, struggling, having a lot of frustration or a sense of maybe they're broken or they're doing it wrong, and it could just be a lack of skill or a lack of know-how or a lack of clarity, right? So I want to just inform you in this video of what these paradigm shifts are, right? Because without them, usually you're going to kind of just go in circles and bang your head against the wall, not get the result, and wonder why you're not healing, why you're not growing, why things aren't improving. So let's unpack it here. Okay, so the first paradigm shift that most people go through when they take psychedelics, I think is pretty clear, pretty obvious to most of you. And this is the general mindset shift of, let's say, unplugging from status quo, consensus, default perception of reality and into this kind of more open-ended, kind of broad, uh, other perception of life and reality, right? So there, in the new age world, there's all kinds of names and labels and concepts that get attached to this. But if we're not going to buy into all of that necessarily, we can just think of it as, before you took psychedelics, you saw life, in a very kind of standard, status quo. Society is like this, the world is like this, I'm like this, my family's like this, money's like this, jobs are like this, careers are like this. This is the default life track that I should be on, kind of view of reality, right? There's good, there's bad, there's right, there's wrong. There's these kind of hard moral distinctions. There's kind of this judgmentalism. There's kind of this implicit materialism if you're raised in Western country. And there's this kind of worldview that we are all kind of raised in, that media reflects back to us all the time, that, our social structures and our family and maybe our religions, kind of reflect back to us. I'm sure you know what I mean. I think broadly speaking, we could call this default status quo social conditioning, right? So the first paradigm shift that happens is kind of a loosening, sometimes a full disruption, but more often it's a loosening of this default kind of social conditioning that leaves us with a much more open-ended, much more ambiguous, less clear, less like paint by numbers, but more kind of liberating, often more beautiful, but also often more confusing worldview. This might include things like understanding that there's another layer to reality than just the kind of material layer of reality that we kind of live through when we're raised to understand is real and normal, right? Another big shift that happens is starting to understand that perhaps your sense of self, your sense of identity, who the narrative that you've told yourself you are, that others have told you that you are, might be a bit of a construct, might be a bit of a limited concept and not the full story or the full picture. Some other kind of things that are common to this kind of shift in paradigm is starting to see things in terms of energetics and energy, if you believe in that, seeing things in terms of spirituality and a spiritual layer to reality, if you believe in that, seeing things in terms of subjectivity of human experience, seeing things in terms of vibes or qualia or feeling or this kind of a thing, right? Tone, vibration. These are all kind of new ways of understanding life that you don't need to take psychedelics to wrap your head around at all, but I think are very common to early psychedelic experiences, right? There's a bunch of other ones, but I'm sure you probably get the gist of what I mean, especially if you've taken a psychedelic, right? This is the first paradigm shift that people kind of go into, and it's an unplugging, like I said, from status quo default kind of social conditioning into this kind of, broadly speaking, psychedelic worldview, right? And now here's the problem. Here's the problem is that for a lot of people, once they've made that shift, they just go whole hog into this psychedelic kind of worldview, this other way of seeing things, not understanding that that is also a paradigm and also a particular worldview with a particular set of concepts and language and constructions, and also another way of formatting and shaping our understanding of reality that also has limits, judgments, concepts that kind of may or may not be accurate, etc. So there's already, we're kind of trading one paradigm for another, and the new one maybe is better, but may not be. Now, the problem I see a lot for people when they want to heal, when they want to use psychedelics for healing, is now they've maybe traded out this old, social conditioning for this kind of new psychedelic worldview, this psychedelic paradigm, but they kind of tend to follow the psychedelic paradigm as though that's going to lead to healing, and usually it doesn't, right? So in particular, what I mean here is starting to buy into some of the insights and the perceptions and the narratives and the new age concepts and how all that's been put together in the psychedelic community. One of the major mistakes I see happen over and over and over is people buy into that now, and then they expect that that's going to fix them or heal them or do the therapeutic thing for them, and it doesn't, right? Because that paradigm isn't particularly accurate, and because really, it's not a paradigm that gives you access to that healing layer or what needs healing. So there is a second paradigm shift you have to make, right? And this is where a lot of people I see in the psychedelic community are stuck. This is why just eating 5 grams of mushrooms over and over and over may give you relief, but isn't going to actually heal the thing, right? Because there is a second paradigm shift that needs to happen. And this is a paradigm shift more around understanding or reframing your understanding of self, understanding of world, understanding of relationship, to align more with perhaps how a therapeutic approach would work, right? So the second paradigm shift is about aligning yourself to a whole new way of seeing your issues, your personal history, who you are, what you're dealing with. So let me explain this in a little more detail. So some of the shifts, a major one is a shift from pathology orientation or pathology language to regulation, right? So this is one I've been talking about here on the channel a lot. This is really drawing from the kind of somatic therapy concept of nervous system or emotional regulation as one of the core things we're up to in a healing process, right? So if you go to a typical psychiatrist, for sure, but even I would say most standard psychologists, they are going to look at you and think of what you're dealing with through a lens of pathology, through a lens of what is the problem? What is your dysfunction? Something about you is not working right, and we need to fix this pathology. right? So this is this pathological lens. And there's a use to it, and really that kind of pathology orientation is drawn from like the medical model, which, allopathic medicine in Western science is very much problem focused, very much focused on what is the disease, what is the issue, not on, the system as a whole or holism or other ways of addressing health issues. And I would say for physical issues, there's obviously that works really well. Obviously, a pathology orientation in allopathic medicine is a highly successful, productive model of health, right? In a lot of ways. It has its flaws. We could go into the critiques about it, but let's just say in general, it fucking works, right? So it's understandable that they would want to map that onto psychology, right? But I don't think that that's an accurate even mapping over. I don't think you can one-to-one translate physical ailments to psychological and emotional issues. I think these are different things fundamentally, even though they both occur in the body and there's overlap there. I think they're different. And so the understanding here is that when you look at yourself through a pathology lens, so if you're looking at yourself, I have depression, I have anxiety, I have PTSD, right? I have symptom whatever, blah, 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 symptom yada, yada, right? Anytime we're in that way of thinking, we're focused on the problem and we're focused on it as a symptom. What we're not looking at is what needs to happen to resolve this, what needs to happen to heal this. And almost always what's underneath is a need for nervous system regulation. In other words, a return to well-being, a return to safety, a felt sense of safety in our own skin, in our own environment. And this needs to be put first, right? So one of the paradigm shifts to get the most out of healing, what I'm saying here, let me make it as clear as I can. One of the paradigm shifts you need to go through in order to use psychedelics effectively to heal is to get outside of a pathology way of thinking about your issues and into looking at your issues through the lens of nervous system regulation. Am I stressed? Am I unbalanced? Am I dissociated? Am I nervous? Am I angsty? Am I ruminating? Am I vigilant? Or am I safe, cool, balanced, comfortable, relaxed, content? Where am I in that spectrum, right? And in what instances, in what areas of my life, right? This is a different way of thinking about it. This is a paradigm shift and one that you need to make. Okay, so ranting, but hopefully you get the point here. Second one, we need to make a paradigm shift from outcome orientation to process orientation. Right. So this is something I learned in my studies of coaching and hypnosis and in personal development work. And it really, really maps over here to the healing work and the kind of psychedelic work very much so. So in the kind of old paradigm, the way you probably think success is all about outcome. Success is all about when I get the thing, everything will be better. Everything will be fixed. Everything will be right. Right. That's not a really useful way of thinking about how to use psychedelics or just generally, I would say, a healing journey. If you're on a healing journey or a personal development journey or a spiritual growth journey, you don't want to think of it in terms of outcome. It doesn't work that way. It's a process. It is a process that you engage in over and over and over, the output of which is healing, is regulation, is well-being. But it's a process. Why is it a process and not an outcome? Because your nervous system is an ongoing dynamic thing that operates in cycles, that has patterns and habituation as part of how it learns. And it is a constant dynamic moving thing, meaning that you need a skill of process orientation to work with your nervous system to, know how to be healed and healthy and how to return yourself to this regulated, healthy state any and every time you need to. This is a way different way of thinking about it than, oh, I'm going to take a pill and that will fix me, right? That paradigm does not fit the reality that I keep seeing here. So, second one. Third one, moving from symptom to systems. Okay, so just like, pathology and outcome, these all kind of map onto each other, overlap a lot. Another big one is that a lot of people, when they're working on their issues, they want to heal, they want to grow, they're thinking in terms of their symptoms. I have anxiety, I have depression, etc. I have problem X, right? Rather than looking at the holistic system of your life that includes, sure, your past, your environment currently, your value system, what's going right in your life, what's not going right in your life, capabilities you've developed, capabilities you never developed that you need. Let me see, resources you have, resources you need to cultivate, how all these things interact and overlap at different levels of your being, including cognitive and emotional and somatic and spiritual, right? It's not just I have depression, right? Or I have anxiety. That's way too simple a way of describing it, and often too broad, too umbrella term to really clearly understand what's happening with yourself and how to go about resolving that, right? So we want to look at ourselves and the process systemically, right? From a nervous system perspective, and from a cycles perspective, and from an input output perspective, and what happens, and etc. So this is another huge paradigm shift, right? Letting go of symptom and outcome and moving into process and systems, right? Huge. And this is why people who just take psychedelics to get an outcome, to fix their brain, to rewire their brain, but they don't know what the hell they're doing, this is why it doesn't work. Right? This is why you can have all the big ego deaths and all the profound spiritual experiences, and you can go do ayahuasca in the jungle for years and still have your, your funky dysfunction, whatever that is. This is why, because there's a paradigm shift that a lot of people don't recognize that they need to make in order to see self and process and issue the whole thing differently. Right? Here's a fourth one. Let me share this and then we'll wrap the video. Okay. I know I'm a little ranty. I'm a little intense. I didn't expect to talk as much as I am on this video, but hopefully you're getting value out of it. If you are, do me a favor, drop a like, get a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, leave some engagement here. Let me know that this is resonating for you. Okay. Anyways, on to the fourth. So the fourth one would be to move from figuring out why you have the problem, and this is a very common thing I see for people, to working with what arises without having to know exactly what it is. So let me tell you this point blank, because you need to know this if you haven't heard this yet. You can heal trauma without remembering what the event was or what the experience was. If you study trauma therapy, if you watch Peter Levine's videos or any of the amazing trauma therapists out there from all the different modalities, they'll say this over and over. It's really true in my experience. You don't need to know. You don't need to know why. Okay? I understand the identity, the ego, the mind likes to know why. And the underlying assumption there is usually something like, if I know why this happened, then I'll feel better. Then it'll be fixed. Then with that clarity, I will then be resolved around this. Not so, and that's a major, I think, assumption that goes all the way back to psychoanalysis and Freud. And I don't think it's really true. I do think there is a time and a place for the cognitive aspect of working with our issues, for the narrative aspect of working with our issues. And spoiler alert, unplugging from your narrative is very helpful. I'll be doing another video about that. And we are fundamentally meaning-making animals and story-based animals. And so to a certain degree, we can't help but want to know and figure out and understand what the story is, what happened. But the other side of that coin is you don't need to know that in order to actually resolve. You don't need to know that to actually heal. It's useful, but what I find happens a lot is when people let go of the story, because you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't know, what bits of your story you've totally forgotten or you were too young to remember that may be a part of it that you just don't have a conceptual framework for. So instead of trying to dig for that over and over and drive yourself crazy, if you just work with what's already there and already arising as a mystery, right? And that's the scary bit here, is people are super afraid of dealing with the unknown in themselves. Right? This is part of why we look for why, is then I can see what's coming and I can prepare myself for it, right? Rather than the skill of working with what's arising in the moment and not knowing, right? That sounds scarier. I get it. in practice, what I find is when we do this properly, it's actually not scarier. It's actually a lot of ways easier and revelatory and profound and beautiful, right? But that's another, put that aside for a moment. When we work from this kind of bottom up, I don't know, but I'm working with what I have here, the feelings, the imprints, the intuitions, and we start to unpack it. What I find over and over and over is people get the clarity, but they get the clarity on the backside of a shift or a healing or a realization or an awakening or transformation rather than up front. So, this is another huge paradigm shift. Instead of I need to know and I need to see up front, and I need to prepare myself and I need to protect myself from the contents of my own subconscious mind so that I can go in and work with it. The other paradigm shift is letting go of needing to know why, trusting yourself, trusting the process, trusting the tools, trusting the experience, trusting the medicine, and then working with what arises, following that through, working that all the way through, and you will get clarity and resolution. So this is a different way of going about it, but I think it's way more effective a lot of times. And in this, think about this. So a lot of the wounds that happen for people developmentally happen before we have memory, happen before we have a linguistic construct or linguistic brain, right? So we don't have the structures in place yet to be able to put words to some of these memories. Sometimes they're just feelings. Sometimes they're just emotions or body sensations or spatial awareness things. They're fragments of early experience with no conceptual context for them. So if we're digging for conceptual memory, we're not going to find it. But that information, those feelings, those imprints, those are there and they can be worked with. So anyways, I'm kind of off in the weeds here a little bit with examples, but hopefully I've kind of made clear this paradigm shift, right? So the first paradigm shift, just to summarize here really quick, and then we will wrap the video. Holy moly, 20 minutes, way longer than expected. First paradigm shift is really from kind of status quo reality to a more psychedelic paradigm, if you want to think of it that way. Things like energy, things like subjectivity, the validity of all human experience, things like perhaps energy or spirituality, or at very least a sense that the world is much more mysterious and open-ended than perhaps we first thought, right? A lot of people park there and then they don't get the results. So the second paradigm shift you have to go through is a paradigm shift of understanding what the worldview is that opens up the capacity to heal, especially, in terms of issues. And really what this looks like, again, is a paradigm shift of, moving out of a pathology lens, moving out of an outcome lens, moving out of a symptom way of thinking of your issues and into understanding things like regulation and process orientation and systems view of yourself and, trusting the process rather than trying to know and have a narrative about it up front. I'm going to leave it there because I've already yammered on here. Let me know if this is valuable to you. Let me know, does this hit home? Does this resonate? Is this helpful? I'm trying to make stronger content for you that's much more clear and on point so I can really connect the dots here for you. So let me know down below. And if this is your first time watching the channel, thank you for making it all the way through the video with me. Much love to you. More content on the way soon. As always, take care.